Hey guys, tonight we drift back in time to a world before the alarm clock, before the clink of espresso machines, before even the word breakfast as you know it existed. You're lying on a woven mat inside a caravanserai somewhere near Samarkand, the air still cool from the desert night. Outside, the first pink blush of dawn stains the horizon, and a camel groans like a tired uncle who's just remembered Monday exists. A fire crackles nearby, the smell of smoke blending with dough rising on a clay griddle. You probably won't survive this. At least not the morning stench of 50 merchants and their livestock in one courtyard. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stretch, brushing off the sand and shuffle toward the courtyard. The Silk Road stirs to life, a line of dust and dreams connecting China to the Mediterranean. Traders from every corner of the known world stir embers back to flame. You can almost hear the stories in their yawns. Someone offers you flatbread, round, blistered, still warm. You tear it, steam curling into the crisp dawn. It tastes faintly of salt and ash, the kind of bread that's fed humanity since fire met flour. The man smiles with gold-capped teeth. He's from Bukhara, or maybe Damascus. You can't tell. He speaks a few words of Persian, a bit of Turkic, and gestures with his hands like any tired traveler craving breakfast before bureaucracy. This early hour along the Silk routes isn't glamorous. It's survival with a side of routine. A bowl of hot gruel here, a pinch of dried fruit there. Every traveler carries something edible, because no one trusts that the next town's market will still be open, or friendly. Historians still argue whether the word breakfast even applies to these first meals, since most ancient travelers didn't break a fast so much as pause starvation. A few stalls open near the gate. The scent of sesame oil joins the smoke of burning dung, a reminder that luxury and necessity often share the same flame. A Chinese merchant unwraps a parcel of jianbing, an early ancestor of the crepe, filled with scallions and eggs. He doesn't call it that yet, of course. It's just food for the road. A Persian scribe nearby mutters a blessing before dipping bread into a stew of lentils. You try to follow the motion, mimicking the swirl, the dip, the slow rhythm of morning patience. Flat bread seems to be the universal greeting along these routes. Some are crisp like parchment, others soft as a sigh. In Samarkand, the bread carries a stamp, pressed by a carved wooden mold, sometimes depicting stars or flowers. It's art you can eat, though barely, because the dust seems determined to add its own seasoning. A boy runs past you, clutching a tray of dried apricots. You catch one as he stumbles and he grins, already bartering. 2 for 1 piece of bread. You agree. Sweetness for sustenance. Trade was always personal first. The fruit's syrupy tang wakes you better than coffee could. Yes, I know, no coffee yet. Tragic times. The clatter of hooves begins outside the gate. A caravan heading west. The donkeys jingle with bronze bells, rhythmic and hypnotic. You watch as people load their wares. Silk bundles, porcelain jars, sacks of millet, spices sealed in wax. Somewhere a man laughs, deep and rough, and tells a joke about camels, never skipping breakfast because they carry their stomachs on their backs. You laugh politely. There are worse puns in history. Across the yard, a cook squats beside an iron cauldron, stirring a thick porridge that bubbles like lava. He tells you it's made from barley, flavored with goat's milk and honey. You accept a bowl, hot enough to test your commitment to taste buds. The sweetness lingers. The milk carries a faint sourness that reminds you the goats here probably make their own yogurt when no one's looking. Samarkand mornings, the cook says, are for quiet mouths and loud stomachs. You nod. He's not wrong. In a corner, a few monks from a Buddhist monastery share their meal in silence. Plain rice, a small dish of pickled vegetables, and tea, so weak it's practically tinted water. Their serenity is contagious. You sit near them, noticing how every movement, pouring, lifting, chewing, is deliberate, as if breakfast itself were a meditation. The silk routes have never been just roads. They're veins. They pulse with language, faith, and flavor. Each bowl, each loaf, is a message sent and received. And in these early hours, before traders start shouting prices and scribes start copying contracts, breakfast becomes the one universal peace treaty. Mainstream historians agree that Samarkand, Bukhara, and Kashgar were among the Silk Road's great hubs, but they still argue whether most travelers ate communally or kept to their own provisions. Evidence from caravanserai ruins, stone hearths, charred bones, clay bowls suggests both. People mixed when it was practical, or when the smell from someone else's pot was too tempting to ignore. One quirky tidbit. Archaeologists once found traces of coriander and sesame in a clay pot buried near an ancient Silk Road inn. Someone's breakfast spice mix survived nearly 2,000 years, perfectly sealed under sand. Imagine the heartbreak of smelling it now, and realizing there's no bread to dip in it. You finish your bowl, the last spoonful thick and sweet, sticking to your teeth like nostalgia. The courtyard's noise swells as daylight strengthens. A muezzin calls to prayer from a distant tower, his voice carrying over the lowing camels and clinking pots. The merchants pause, heads bowed, and for a brief, suspended moment, even the animals seem still. Then, life resumes. Deals restart. The cook begins kneading new dough. The boy shouts about his apricots again. And you? Well, you wipe your hands on your robe and watch the first caravan disappear into a rising sun. You breathe in the mingled sense of dust, bread, and possibility. Breakfast is over, but the road is long, and the next morning promises something new to taste, somewhere far ahead. The road stretches east this time, winding through cool desert air that tastes faintly of metal and smoke. You've joined a smaller caravan now, mostly traders from China, Persia, and a few wanderers who, like you, seem to be chasing stories more than profit. Dawn rolls softly over the dunes, painting the horizon a bruised violet. Someone ahead lights a fire. The smoke spirals lazily upward, and soon the familiar morning ritual begins. You follow the smell of boiling water. It's not just any water, it carries the perfume of crushed leaves, maybe green tea, maybe herbs, maybe something entirely experimental. Out here, the line between medicine and breakfast drink blurs faster than steam in the air. A Chinese merchant kneels by the fire, pouring hot water over a small bundle of dried leaves. The aroma hits you before you see the cup. It's grassy, alive, and slightly bitter. He hands you a sip in the clay cup, watching your face for approval. You cough once, theatrically. It's stronger than you expected, but then smile. He grins, satisfied, and tells you this tea traveled farther than most people do in their lifetimes. Historians still argue whether tea began as a morning drink or as a medicinal potion. The most accepted story, though wrapped in myth, claims Emperor Shennong discovered tea when leaves accidentally drifted into his boiling water nearly 5,000 years ago. The emperor, being both curious and apparently very trusting of random foliage, drank it, and thus a dynasty's worth of caffeine dependency began. You watch the merchant refill the cup again, this time sprinkling a few toasted grains of rice into the pot. The brew thickens slightly, becoming a sort of tea-porridge hybrid. He explains that on long journeys, tea wasn't just for sipping. It filled stomachs when rations ran low. You nod, thinking how modern influencers would probably sell it as detox broth for 50 silver coins a jar. Nearby, a Persian trader unrolls a small bundle of beans, dark, glossy, unfamiliar. He grinds them between two stones, humming as he works. You ask what it is. He shrugs, says it's a new thing from Yemen. You lean in, inhaling a smell both burnt and inviting. Coffee, though it doesn't have that name yet, is making its debut on this side of the world. The pot he uses is crude, little more than blackened metal. He pours water over the grounds and sets it near the edge of the flame. The liquid bubbles, spits, and finally settles into a frothy surface. He serves it in cups the size of walnuts. You sip, and your tongue protests. Bitter, smoky, earthy, like someone boiled ambition and forgot the sugar. But then, a warmth spreads through you, not just in your stomach, but in your head. Focus sharpens. The world becomes a little more awake. You realize this is how mornings changed forever. Mainstream historians agree that both tea and coffee were once linked to sacred or medicinal rituals before becoming social staples. Monks in China drank tea to stay alert during meditation. Centuries later, Sufi mystics in Arabia used coffee for long nights of chanting and prayer. So yes, your morning caffeine habit technically has divine approval, though probably not for doom scrolling. Someone else adds to the olfactory chaos by boiling milk in a bronze pot. The smell is rich and slightly sour. A Mongol traveler stirs it with a stick of wood that looks suspiciously unwashed. He grins when he catches your look. Fermentation keeps us healthy, he insists. You're unconvinced but intrigued. He offers you a taste. Thin, salty, with a tang that could wake the dead. It's the ancestor of the yogurt drinks you'll meet later. But for now, it's called kumis or arag, depending on who you ask. Historians still debate whether fermented milk spread west from the steppe or east from Persia. The evidence is smeared across ancient pottery shards showing microscopic milk fat residues. Yes, even archaeology gets weirdly dairy sometimes. You squat beside the fire, clutching your tea in one hand and your courage in the other. The sounds around you, camels snorting, beans grinding, water bubbling, form a sleepy symphony. Every traveler seems to have their own version of morning, and each brew tells a cultural story in liquid form. A woman from Kashgar approaches, her hands full of small earthen jars sealed with wax. She sells them for a few coins each, claiming they hold miracle brew. You pry one open and find a thick paste of herbs, honey, and crushed almonds. She instructs you to mix it with hot water. The result is surprisingly pleasant. Sweet, nutty, energizing. She calls it breakfast medicine, and you call it the world's first smoothie. You sit back as the caravan prepares to move again. Cups clink, smoke thins, conversations rise and fall. The desert sky lightens to pale gold, and somewhere in the distance, a rooster dares to announce itself. Probably the bravest creature within 100 miles. You think about how simple these moments are, and yet how much history will spring from them. The habit of starting the day with something hot and shared becomes civilization's quiet heartbeat. Whether it's tea, coffee, or spiced milk, every culture finds comfort in that first sip. Even now, centuries later, people everywhere still cling to mugs as if they're anchors in the stormy sea of waking up. A quirky tidbit slips into your mind. Early Chinese tea drinkers sometimes added onion, ginger, and orange peel into their brew. Imagine that at your local cafe. Yes, hi. Can I get a venti scallion latte? Humanity has always experimented, and occasionally regretted it. As the caravan rolls forward, the cook tosses leftover tea leaves into the sand. You watch them darken and curl, their aroma fading into the morning wind. The last sip in your cup has gone cold, but it tastes like discovery. You're no longer just passing through landscapes. You're tracing the veins of culture, one breakfast at a time. The trail narrows into rocky ridges. Camels grunt, wheels creak. Someone hums a tune that sounds older than the mountains. You walk, careful not to spill what's left of your drink, thinking of how this ritual, boiling, pouring, sharing, connects every soul on the road. By the time the sun rises fully, your cup is empty, and your hands are warm. You tuck the memory away. The first shared brews of the silk roots, mingling smoke and sunrise. Somewhere behind you, the scent lingers like a promise that every morning, no matter the century, begins with steam. By the time you leave the rocky pass behind, the land softens into green terraces and fields of ripening grain. Dawn unfurls across the plains like a slow exhale, and you follow the smell of something nutty roasting in a clay pan. The caravan has stopped again, this time near a river that catches the light like spilled silk. A few herders are already awake, grinding something between stones. You wander closer. Millet. The tiny golden seeds spill across rough palms like coins. They're roasting it lightly before boiling, the scent earthy and a little sweet, like popcorn's ancient cousin. Someone adds water, stirs with a stick, and the pot begins to bubble in rhythm with the waking world. Breakfast along the silk routes isn't fancy. It's elemental. Grains, milk, a handful of dried fruit if you're lucky. But this morning, watching the steam rise from that pot, you realize it's also comfort in edible form. The porridge thickens, turning glossy and pale. You dip a wooden spoon, blow on it, and taste something that feels like survival. Historians still argue whether millet or rice was humanity's first true breakfast grain. The debate stretches across dusty excavation sites where ancient pots still cling to starch residue. The evidence points both ways. Northern China cultivated millet as early as 8000 BCE, while the river valleys farther south were already nurturing rice paddies. Either way, the conclusion's delicious. We've been eating warm mush to start the day for 10,000 years. A farmer hands you a clay bowl and gestures to the river. You sit, legs dangling over the bank, and eat while fish flicker beneath the surface. The porridge sticks to your ribs, filling you with the kind of energy that makes even walking seem ambitious. Someone beside you adds a drizzle of honey and chopped almonds. The sweetness cuts through the grain's monotony, and you realize flavor too once traveled these roads in tiny, precious jars. You take another bite, savoring the texture. It's not smooth like modern oatmeal. It has grit, personality. You chew, feeling every grain's stubbornness. Passing scholar laughs softly and says that even in his monastery, where silence reigns, breakfast still crunches. He introduces himself as Li from Dunhuang, a pilgrim carrying Buddhist scriptures. His pack clinks with small bronze bells, and his patience seems as endless as the road. He tells you that in his monastery, breakfast is served before sunrise, always the same. Rice congee with pickled mustard greens. The idea, he explains, is humility. Food should never distract from reflection. You nod, pretending you don't still dream about fried eggs. A little further down the riverbank, a woman from the Sogdian plains is kneading dough. She sprinkles crushed millet into it, laughing as her child steals handfuls. She shapes small cakes, presses them flat with her palms, and drops them onto a hot stone. The smell is unreal. Nutty, buttery, slightly caramelized. You bite into one when she offers it, and it crumbles perfectly, leaving traces of smoke on your tongue. She calls them katlama, a word you tuck away to remember later. Mainstream historical fact. Grains weren't just food. They were symbols. In ancient China, rice represented life and virtue, and millet was tied to the cycles of the earth. Even Persian Zoroastrians used grain in ritual offerings to honor creation. You think about that as you chew, realizing breakfast wasn't simply the start of the day. It was a small act of gratitude for still having one. The caravan readies to move again, but you linger. You watch how every person has their own rhythm. One stirs, another raps, another chews in silence. Breakfast isn't social here. It's sacred multitasking. Fuel for trade, prayer, gossip, and survival. A quirky tidbit drifts through your memory. Archaeologists found a wooden bowl in western China containing what might be the world's oldest noodles, made from millet flour and preserved under silt for 4,000 years. Imagine being that archaeologist. Congratulations, you've discovered lunch. But still, the idea stands. Grain was life, whether stretched into noodles, boiled into porridge, or baked into cakes. Lee the Pilgrim finishes his congee and wipes the bowl clean with a piece of dried bread. Waste nothing, he murmurs. Even crumbs remember the hand that made them. You glance at your nearly empty bowl and feel oddly chastened by this breakfast sermon. Historians still debate whether ancient travelers actually enjoyed these meals, or simply endured them. Records from Persian poets praise honeyed porridges and fruit-studded bread, but others complain about bland gruels that clung to spoons like sorrow. Maybe both are true. After all, even today, someone's oatmeal masterpiece is another person's punishment. The morning grows warmer. Farmers begin to work the fields, their tools flashing in the sunlight. You hear laughter from the caravan as traders argue over grain prices. The universal truth about breakfast. Even when everyone's full, no one's done talking about food. You step away from the camp, carrying a leftover millet cake wrapped in cloth. The world hums softly. Wind in grass, water against stone, distant bells marking time. You bite into the cake again, crumbs scattering. You imagine each tiny piece might take root somewhere, sprouting new harvests long after you're gone. As you walk, you spot a small shrine by the roadside, its roof covered with offerings, grains, dried figs, a cup of milk gone sour in the heat. Travelers leave food here for spirits, hoping for safe passage. You add a spoonful of porridge from your bowl, feeling slightly ridiculous but oddly peaceful. Superstition, faith, breakfast, they blur together before noon. The caravan calls. You shoulder your pack, wiping your hands on your robe. The river sparkles one last time as you glance back, and you realize how every grain of millet, every spoon of rice, has carried more than hunger across the silk routes. It's carried the memory of mornings, of waking, of sharing, of beginning again. You take one last bite before mounting your camel, and the grain crunches between your teeth like sand underfoot. Ancient, stubborn, eternal. The dunes return before noon, and with them, the silence that seems to stretch forever. You're back among the caravans across the desert's shimmering expanse, and the sun feels close enough to bite. Dust clings to your eyelashes, and each step sinks a little too deep. Still, the air carries a scent that makes the effort worthwhile. Sweetness, thick and heady, like caramel melting in sunlight. It's the smell of dates. You spot them piled high in woven baskets, the fruits gleaming amber and mahogany under strips of shade. Traders rest beside their camels, unwrapping bundles tied in linen. They break fast, not with bread this time, but with sugar, natural, portable, and perfectly suited for desert life. You accept one offered to you, its skin sticky, the flesh soft and almost floral. The sweetness fills your mouth instantly, washing away the taste of dust. You could live on these, you think, and for many travelers, that wasn't far from the truth. Historians still argue whether dates originated in Mesopotamia or along the Persian Gulf, but everyone agrees they were the desert's lifeline. A handful could sustain a person for hours, sometimes days. Rich in fiber and sugar, they were the original energy bar, minus the marketing and the guilt. The merchants here seem to have perfected the art of breakfast minimalism. A bowl of dates, a little water, and maybe, if fortune smiles, a handful of nuts. You sit with them, your shadow barely visible against the pale sand. One man crushes dried apricots and almonds together, mixing them into a paste with honey. He rolls the mixture into small orbs and presses them flat. Energy cookies, 14th century edition. ... He grins, offering you one. For the road, he says. You bite in. The texture is grainy but rich. The flavor, a burst of sunlight trapped in fruit. You wonder how many merchants fell in love with this recipe. How many mornings it saved. A water seller appears, his voice rhythmic, almost musical, calling to anyone parched enough to pay. He pours you a bowl of water tinted slightly brown from the clay jar, cool and mineral. You sip slowly. The drink leaves a faint sweetness on your tongue, maybe from the residue of dates that had been soaking inside. Across the small camp, two travelers debate the proper way to start the day. One, a scholar from Nishapur, insists that the Prophet himself favored dates and water before any other food. The other, a spice dealer from Balkh, argues that dried figs are more refined and spiritually balanced. You smile at their banter. Apparently, breakfast debates are as old as breakfast itself. To your left, a group of women prepares something different. A paste of sesame seeds and honey spread on thin bread. The smell alone could make a philosopher forget his vows of restraint. You take a piece, little and warm, and the honey oozes slightly around the edges. The woman who made it laughs when you hum your approval. "Hey," quickly, she says, before the sun eats it first. The desert heat is merciless. The honey begins to soften, and flies appear from nowhere, persistent as guilt. You wave them away, licking your fingers. The sweetness clings to your skin. A camel grumbles behind you, its way of reminding everyone that breakfast is not a universal privilege. The handlers toss the animals dry grass, mixed with crushed date pits, proving that even beasts of burden share in the sugary abundance of the desert. Mainstream history teaches that oases along the silk routes were more than just watering holes. They were culinary crossroads. Places like Merv and Hiva became legendary for their fruit preserves and honeyed treats. Travelers arrived starving and left sticky-fingered, their saddlebags heavier with jars wrapped in cloth. A quirky tidbit. Archaeologists excavating near ancient Merv found shards of pottery that still smelled faintly of honey after 12 centuries. Imagine opening a jar buried under sand for 1,000 years and catching the ghost of sweetness. The past, it seems, never quite stops feeding us. The air grows hotter, and you retreat to the shadow of a tent flap. Inside, traders sit cross-legged around a small brass tray holding dried fruit, cheese, and a peculiar golden paste. You taste it, dense, nutty, almost smoky. It's made from ground chickpeas, roasted in ghee and mixed with sugar. They call it halwa, which simply means sweet. You've probably eaten a dozen modern versions without realizing you were biting into a Silk Road invention. Historians still debate where halwa was first concocted. Persia claims it, India tweaks it, and Central Asia swears it was always theirs. What's certain is that it traveled faster than silk itself. Because let's be honest, humans will always prioritize dessert. Outside the tent, the desert glows like an oven. The horizon ripples. Camels rest with their legs tucked neatly beneath them, eyes half closed, chewing with infinite patience. Someone begins to hum. A low, meandering melody that feels like sunlight turned to sound. You close your eyes, letting the rhythm sink with your breath. For a moment, everything is simple. You, the sand, the sun, and the faint aftertaste of honey and dates. Breakfast as meditation. The hum becomes background music for thought. You imagine ancient caravans before this one, stopping at the same oasis, the same hour, performing the same ritual, unwrapping sweetness to fight the bitterness of travel. A wind picks up, carrying the scent of palm sap and distant smoke. Someone somewhere is roasting nuts again. Maybe almonds, maybe pistachios. You can tell by the crackling sound. The wind cools your face just enough to make you forget how much you've sweated. The sun climbs higher, and shadows shorten to almost nothing. The merchants begin to pack up, their laughter fading into grunts as they hoist sacks onto beasts. You watch the oasis shrink behind you as the caravan sets off again. The palms sway, leaves shimmering like coins. You tuck a few dates into your pouch, wrapping them carefully. Each feels like a tiny promise of energy, of sweetness waiting for its cue. You pop one into your mouth before moving on. The sugar hits your bloodstream like sunlight catching your veins. You walk faster, lighter, as if the desert itself has decided to give you a little push. Historians like to describe the Silk Road as arteries of trade, but in this moment, it feels more like a breakfast table stretched across continents. Each stop another course, another flavor, another way to say, we're still alive. You glance back one last time at the disappearing palms, thinking of all the hands that once peeled, pitted, and shared this same fruit. Every bite, a connection, ancient, sticky, and enduring. By nightfall, the dunes fade into rolling grasslands, and you can smell the steppe before you see it. A wild, crisp scent of grass, smoke, and horses. The caravan slows as the land opens wide, an endless ocean of green under the silver wash of dawn. You wake to the sound of hooves, a chorus of snorts, and the clatter of metal bowls. Morning here doesn't come with the slow luxury of markets or oases. It comes with urgency. Horses to saddle, fires to build, milk to churn. You step outside your tent and immediately catch sight of it. A circle of yurts, smoke rising in elegant ribbons from each felt dome. Inside one, laughter rings out, a sound both raw and warm. You follow it and find yourself welcomed into a nomad camp of Mongol herders, their faces weathered and bright, their hands always busy. Breakfast is already underway. A woman squats beside a wide wooden churn, shaking it rhythmically. The sound is soft but relentless, like a heartbeat muffled by wool. You ask what's inside. She smiles. Irag, she says. Fermented mare's milk. You hesitate, perhaps remembering your earlier encounter with fermented dairy, but curiosity wins again. She pours some into a bowl. It's frothy and white, with a scent somewhere between sour cream and adventure. You take a sip. Your tongue tingles. Your eyes water. It's tangy, slightly alcoholic, and startlingly alive. You laugh despite yourself. She grins and pats your shoulder. Wow, no say. Well, one tea with. Share bread? Good, yes, she asks. You nod. Goodish, you reply diplomatically. Historians still argue whether nomadic peoples like the Mongols invented yogurt and fermented milk independently, or borrowed the technique from their sedentary neighbors. Either way, their mastery of milk was unmatched. They fermented it, dried it, smoked it, and even carried it in leather bags hung on horseback so the motion of the ride would churn it naturally. Ancient multitasking at its finest. Nearby, a man stirs something in a shallow iron pan. You wander closer, its curdled milk being heated until it thickens and browns. Kurud, a cheese as hard as stone but perfect for travel. He slices a piece, offers it to you. It's dry, salty, oddly satisfying. You imagine your dentist fainting somewhere across the centuries. As you chew, someone else brings over a bowl of Sigan ID, a spread made from curds, cream and butter, sprinkled with sugar. You smear some onto a hunk of flatbread. The sweetness balances the tang, and for the first time since joining this caravan, you feel full in a way that's not just physical. It's the kind of fullness that comes from being temporarily adopted by people who barely know your name. Oh, a young herder gestures for you to follow him outside the camp. He points toward a herd of mares grazing in the mist. Each animal gleams like polished bronze in the morning light. He explains that milking begins before sunrise and can take hours. If you want good milk, he says, you wake before your shadow does. You make a mental note never to open a dairy business. Mainstream historical fact. Mare's milk was central to Mongol diet and ritual. Genghis Khan himself reportedly drank it before battle for strength and luck. Some sources even claim he refused solid food on campaign days, trusting only his sacred brew. Historians still debate whether that's true or poetic exaggeration, though considering the smell, it might have been strategy. Keep enemies at bay through aroma alone. The boy hands you a small leather pouch, motioning for you to take it as a keepsake. Inside, you find dried curd snacks. Tiny, ivory-colored nuggets hard enough to chip a tooth. You try one anyway. It tastes sharp, like cheese-flavored lightning. He laughs at your reaction. Good for teeth, he insists. You are unconvinced, but smile politely, tucking the pouch away. The camp hums with motion. Women scrape butter into jars. Children chase goats, men saddle horses for scouting. A few sit cross-legged, sharing bowls of hot millet porridge mixed with milk and salt. The grains you met by the river have found new life here. Less sweet, more elemental. You join them. The porridge heavy and satisfying, warming your hands through the bowl. A quirky tidbit floats into memory. In 13th century Mongol camps, fermented milk wasn't just for drinking. It was also used to polish leather, treat wounds, and even as a cosmetic. One medieval traveler swore that Mongol women washed their faces with sour milk for radiance and vigor. You can't help imagining an influencer tutorial. Hey, guys! Today we're exfoliating with yesterday's breakfast. The sun climbs higher, scattering gold across the grass. The camp comes alive in full rhythm. Somewhere, a horse whinnies, a child laughs, and the smell of butter melting on hot stones fills the air. You realize how seamlessly food and life blend here. No sharp edges between meal and movement, between sustenance and story. A weathered elder sits nearby, his beard silvered like frost. He beckons you to sit. You do, cross-legged. He speaks slowly, words shaped by years of wind. Food keeps memory, he says. Every bowl we share remembers the one before it. He sips his irag and gazes into the distance as if breakfast itself were a prayer. You finish your bowl, stomach pleasantly heavy, the tang of fermented milk lingering. Around you, the steppe stretches forever, rolling and endless. The wind whistles low through the grass, carrying the faint scent of smoke and cream. Historians still argue whether the Mongols' reliance on dairy limited their nutrition or made them stronger than their agrarian neighbors. Modern analysis suggests they had impressive endurance, proof, perhaps, that yogurt really does conquer worlds. You mount your camel, an outsider in a world ruled by horses, and glance back at the camp. The yurts look like white shells scattered on green waves, smoke rising from each one like lazy sighs. You wave once, unsure if anyone sees. But it doesn't matter. You've shared their mourning, and that's enough. As you ride away, the taste of fermented milk still lingers, sharp but comforting. You think of Genghis Khan, of children laughing over porridge, of women shaking the churn in rhythm with dawn. Breakfast, you realize, isn't always about pleasure. Sometimes it's a pact with the land, with the herd, with the day itself. The wind rises, cool and insistent. It smells faintly of grass, leather, and sour cream. You grin, whispering to no one in particular. Okay, fine. Maybe yogurt really did conquer the world. The grasslands give way to foothills streaked with wild thyme and dust. You travel west with the caravan, your stomach still loyal to the memory of fermented milk. The wind carries a different scent now. Earthy, floral, and faintly spiced. By the time you reach the outskirts of a bustling Persian town, the air itself feels perfumed. Smoke rises in elegant curls from clay ovens. Morning here doesn't creep in. It stretches awake like a cat, already scented with saffron. The caravan halts before a domed caravanserai outside Nishapur. The building gleams honey gold in the dawn light, its tiled mosaics flickering with turquoise. You can hear the world waking, donkeys braying, bakers shouting, a rooster crowing in heroic futility against the roar of kettles. You follow the smell of bread first, because really, what choice do you have? A baker slides flat discs of dough into the tandoor's glowing mouth, his movements smooth as choreography. The bread puffs instantly, edges blistering into patterns of heat. When he pulls one free, it crackles, the crust tattooed with sesame. He slaps it onto a pillow of cloth and gestures for you to take it. You tear off a corner, soft inside, smoky outside, and bite. It's pure, uncomplicated bliss. Breakfast in Persia, you quickly learn, isn't just about food. It's performance. Nearby, a stall sells steaming bowls of halum, a slow-cooked stew of wheat, butter, and shredded meat that's been stirred all night until it becomes silk in a bowl. You try a spoonful. It's rich, almost sweet, the kind of food that tastes like patience itself. A man beside you explains that halium is eaten at dawn during festivals, but also by traders before long journeys. Strength for the road, he says, flexing a very unconvincing bicep. You smile, stirring another spoonful. Historians still argue whether halium was Persian first or borrowed from Arab and Indian neighbors. The recipe traveled easily, soft, nourishing, endlessly adaptable. The Silk Road's culinary philosophy in one pot. Someone else hands you a small bowl of yogurt blended with cucumber, mint, and a drizzle of sour cherry syrup. The contrast shocks your tongue awake. The yogurt hums with freshness. The syrup sings with tartness. You close your eyes and hum back. The vendor laughs. You sound Persian now, she teases. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval Persian cuisine thrived on balance. hot with cold, sweet with sour, dry with moist. Even breakfast followed the logic of harmony, taught by physicians like Avicenna. Bread and butter were never alone. They arrived with herbs, fruit, or cheese to keep the body's temperaments in check. You wander deeper into the courtyard. A storyteller perches near the fountain, reciting verses from the Shahnameh. Between lines, he sips from a cup of steaming saffron milk. The liquid glows like sunlight. He catches your curious stare and pours a little into another cup. For clarity of voice, he says, "You drink." The milk coats your throat with warmth and whispers of cardamom. Clarity achieved. You sit among the listeners, nibbling more bread, soaking in the rhythm of verse and commerce. Behind you, vendors unpack trays of early fruit, pomegranate seeds glistening like jewels, dried figs split open like little smiles. Someone nearby sprinkles crushed pistachio over warm buttered bread. You take mental notes for later breakfast upgrades. A group of Sufi dervishes enters the courtyard, their robes swirling as they move. They lay down small rugs and begin a quiet chant. After a while, one of them pours thick, sweet tea from a brass pot, the scent of rosewater drifting through the air. He offers you a cup, eyes crinkling. You accept. The tea's warmth feels meditative, almost musical. He explains softly, that morning tea is part of remembrance, of God, of simplicity, of being awake in both body and spirit. Sugar, he adds, helps the tongue remember sweetness in the world. You sip again. Persians really did know how to turn even caffeine into poetry. Historians still debate when tea truly took root in Persia. Some say it arrived from China as early as the 9th century. Others claim it only dominated after coffee's decline. But whichever came first, Persia turned the act of drinking into ceremony. Painted cups, silver trays, and an etiquette that would make your modern brunch table look tragically underdressed. A quirky tidbit. Early Persian physicians recommended breakfast wine mixed with egg yolk for vigor. You picture yourself trying to order that at Starbucks. Yes, 1 grand fortified Shiraz. Please. The dervish chuckles as you share the thought, though you suspect he's laughing more at you than the joke. The sun climbs higher, catching on the fountain's ripples. Around you, the market opens fully. Spices blooming into the air. Turmeric, cumin, coriander. You watch a cook crack eggs into a sizzling pan, their yolks bright as gold coins. He sprinkles them with saffron and a pinch of sumac before sliding them onto fresh bread. The aroma is scandalous. You buy one instantly, tearing into it with greedy reverence. As you eat, a merchant joins you and starts talking about trade. Silks from China, indigo from India, glass from Byzantium. But then his voice softens. Food travels too, he says. Every bite remembers the road. He gestures toward your saffron-stained fingers. Even that color has crossed 1,000 miles. You look down. He's right. Each hue, each spice, each smell here is a border crossed, a history swallowed. You finish your breakfast as the market noise crescendos. Donkeys clatter past with baskets of bread. Children chase each other through clouds of flour dust. The storyteller recites a final verse, his voice echoing off the tiled walls. At dawn, even kings must eat humbly. It feels fitting. You rise, brushing crumbs from your robe, and thank the vendor. The bread smell lingers on your hands, mingled with saffron and smoke. As you step back into the sunlight, you realize Persian mornings are not quiet. They're symphonies of scent, sound, and slow delight. Somewhere behind you, a baker calls out for more firewood. Another pot of helium begins to simmer. Breakfast never really ends here. It just resets for whoever happens to wander in next. You walk toward the western gate, the caravan waiting. Your lips still taste of rosewater tea. Your fingers still stained gold. The road ahead shimmers with promise. And maybe, just maybe, the faint scent of cardamom follows you out. By the time the caravan rolls into the heat of the Indian plains, the air thickens with spice and sound. You can feel the shift before you even cross the border. Colors louder, markets denser, mornings heavier with promise and humidity. Here, dawn doesn't rise quietly. It bursts open like a brass band. Birds shriek, vendors shout, bells ring from temple towers. And somewhere, a woman is already frying something that makes your stomach argue with your conscience. You wake on the edge of a crowded bazaar. The scent of ghee and sizzling batter coils through the air. People move like a current. Merchants, monks, mothers balancing trays on their heads. You follow the smell, because breakfast here doesn't come to you. You have to chase it. The first stall you reach is a blur of motion. A man ladles fermented batter onto a flat iron griddle. The hiss is magnificent. He spreads it thin, adds a spoonful of spicy lentils, folds it over, and slides the result onto a leaf plate. Dosa, he says proudly. You nod, though your mouth is already full. Crisp edges, soft heart, tangy filling. It's a miracle of engineering disguised as breakfast. Historians still argue whether dosa began in the southern temple kitchens or the street stalls of ancient Tamil towns. Some say it was invented by monks seeking a low-cost, high-protein meal. Either way, the idea of fermentation traveled quickly, just like everything else on the silk routes. Batter left overnight, wild yeast from the air. Alchemy hidden in a kitchen bowl. You move to the next stall, where another cook flips golden discs in bubbling ghee. Purus. He serves them with spiced potatoes, still steaming. You tear one open, watching the trapped air escape like a sigh. The curry beneath is thick with turmeric, cumin, and mustard seed. You can't decide if it's breakfast or revelation. A woman beside you dips her puree in yogurt and smiles. In this heat, yogurt keeps us alive, she says. She's right. Hi. The coolness cuts the spice, settling the fire inside you. You ask her how early the market starts. Before the cows wake, she replies with a shrug. You glance at a nearby cow chewing philosophically beside the fruit stall. It's hard to tell who started the day first. At another corner, someone pounds green cardamom pods with mortar and pestle. The scent leaps into the air, sweet and floral, mixing with the smoke of frying onions. A boy runs past carrying a pot of steaming chai. He pours it theatrically from one cup to another, the stream of amber liquid catching the light like molten bronze. You catch his attention with a few coins. He grins, fills a small clay cup, and hands it to you. The first sip is pure comfort. Black tea, milk, sugar, and cardamom hugging your tongue in perfect ratio. You sigh audibly. The boy laughs. You're not from here, he says, but you drink like you are. You smile. Maybe all it takes to belong is the right beverage. Mainstream historians agree that tea reached India from China through trade with Buddhist monks and merchants, though it took British colonization to industrialize the habit. But chai, as you're drinking it, spiced, sweet, milky, is entirely local genius. A remix, centuries before remixes were cool. Nearby, a man in saffron robes chants softly before sipping a mixture of warm milk, honey, and turmeric. He catches you watching and gestures to the bowl. Golden milk, he explains. It clears the mind. You take a sip and nearly cough. The turmeric hits strong, earthy, fierce. But it does something curious. It wakes you in a way no caffeine can. Historians still debate whether this concoction began as Ayurvedic medicine or humble kitchen improvisation, but either way, it feels timeless. The market swells. Vendors stack pyramids of guavas, mangoes, and bananas. A cart sells roasted chickpeas wrapped in newspaper. Somewhere, a sitar twangs lazily. You weave through it all, lost and found at once. A quirky tidbit. In some medieval Indian courts, breakfast wasn't just sustenance. It was theater. The Mughal emperors were known to begin the day with elaborate trays of fruit carved into birds, spiced omelets, and sweets soaked in rosewater. Chroniclers recorded how servants presented each dish with verses of poetry. You imagine trying that at home. Oh, toast, thou golden raft of buttered dreams. Maybe it would make mornings feel regal again. Someone offers you idlis next. Fluffy rice cakes steamed to perfection. Served with coconut chutney, so fresh it might as well still be on the tree. You take one, dip, and bite. Soft, cloud-like, comforting. You could eat 20 at decorum, and the waistband of your travel trousers advises restraint. You sit on the edge of the bazaar with your chai, watching the swirl of humanity. A group of children giggles over plates of puffed rice mixed with peanuts and tamarind. The old man beside them chews sugarcane slowly, staring into space. You realize breakfast here is less a meal and more a celebration of being awake. The soundscape is hypnotic. Spatulas hitting pans, vendors chanting prices, bells clanging from the temple nearby. The air shimmers with heat and spice, as if the morning itself were being fried. You lean back against a wall, dizzy but happy, your senses overwhelmed in the best possible way. A scholar passing through tells you that many travelers along these routes would stop in Indian cities just to rest and eat before pushing west again. Spices, he says, make the body remember the road. You believe him. Every bite seems to echo with distances crossed, mountains climbed, seas dreamed of. Historians still argue about how far Indian breakfast culture influenced others. Did parathas evolve into layered breads of the Middle East? Did spiced milk travel north and turn into Persian desserts? The evidence is fragmentary, the flavors eternal. Your chai cup is empty now, only a trace of sweetness left on your tongue. You watch the cup seller smash the clay vessel after each use. One drink, one cup, no waste. There's poetry in that simplicity. Every morning, a fresh start, literally broken from the past. The sun edges higher. The bazaar hums like a living thing. You stand, feeling both full and lighter somehow, as if the spices themselves have rewritten your pulse. The road west awaits, but a part of you wants to stay here, among the dosa griddles, the laughter, the chaotic grace of mornings that taste like fire and sugar. You take one last sip from a refill of chai. Because, let's be honest, there's always time for one more, and step back into the moving crowd. Somewhere behind you, someone flips another dosa. Somewhere ahead, the Silk Road continues, carrying cardamom dreams toward new horizons. By the time you return northward into the lands of mist and river valleys, mornings soften again. The noise of the Indian bazaar fades behind you, replaced by the hush of bamboo groves and the low murmur of water. You've crossed back into China, though the borders here, centuries ago, breathe and shift like clouds. Dawn arrives, not with shouting vendors, but with steam, soft, rolling, patient. You wake in a guest house near a trading outpost, the air heavy with the scent of rice. Someone downstairs is stirring a pot, the rhythmic clack of a wooden ladle striking iron. You follow the sound. The courtyard glows pale with first light, and a woman ladles something white and velvety into bowls. "Congee?" she says, smiling as you approach. You sit on a wooden stool, the bowl warm in your hands. The rice porridge looks simple, almost austere, but the first spoonful tells another story. It's smooth and soothing. The flavor balance between bland and heavenly. She adds soy sauce, pickled vegetables, and a drizzle of sesame oil. And suddenly your breakfast becomes a quiet masterpiece. Mainstream historians agree that congee, also called zhao, dates back thousands of years, appearing in Han Dynasty records as both peasant fare and royal comfort food. It fed the sick, the poor, the monks, and occasionally emperors nursing hangovers. It's breakfast democracy in a bowl. Across the courtyard, a family unwraps bamboo baskets, releasing clouds of fragrant steam. Inside, dumplings, tiny, translucent, and beautifully folded. Shrimp, pork, vegetables, mystery, all tucked into dough that shines in the early light. You're invited to try one, of course. You burn your tongue, of course. You don't regret it, of course. Dim sum, they call it, touching the heart. You imagine the phrase traveling down the centuries, whispered between cooks and poets. Historians still argue whether dim sum began as a tea-house snack for weary Silk Road travelers or as part of Cantonese hospitality centuries later. Either way, it feels right. Small bites, big feelings. Someone pours you tea. Light, floral, endlessly refillable. The teapot never quite empties, no matter how much you drink. The table fills slowly with more dishes. Sticky rice and lotus leaves, fried dough sticks, steamed buns with red bean paste. You lose track of time and portion control simultaneously. A scholar sitting beside you gestures with his chopsticks. In China, he says, morning is about balance. Soft and warm to calm the stomach, tea to wake the mind. You nod, mouth full of bun. And dumplings to test self-control, you mumble. He laughs, agreeing silently. A quirky tidbit. During the Tang Dynasty, breakfast vendors were among the earliest street entrepreneurs. They sold everything from steamed buns to fried pastries called youtiao, which legend says were invented as a form of protest against corrupt officials. Twisted dough meant to resemble their treacherous bodies, fried until golden. Revenge, but make it delicious. The guesthouse cat hops onto a bench beside you, eyeing your bowl with the authority of someone who owns the place. You offer it a rice grain. It declines, offended. You respect that. Outside, the street begins to hum. Merchants open their stalls, rolling up bamboo shutters. You hear snippets of conversation. Traders haggling over silk, children laughing, the clatter of ceramic bowls being stacked. Breakfast here is public theater. People eat quickly, but with focus, slurping noodles, sipping tea, sharing gossip between bites. The woman who served your congee returns with a jar of something amber and mysterious. She spoons a little onto your bowl. It glistens. Fermented tofu, she explains, for courage. You take a bite. Your courage dissolves instantly. It tastes like salty lightning, but after a few seconds, strangely pleasant. You smile weakly. Ah, powerful, you say. She beams. Historians still debate the origins of fermentation in Chinese breakfast culture. Some claim it was born of necessity, ways to preserve protein before refrigeration. Others argue it was taste-driven, a search for umami, long before anyone had the word. Either way, the practice spread along the silk routes like a slow-burning gospel of flavor. The scholar beside you adds, breakfast is the most honest meal. You can tell a region's soul by its morning. You think back to the airag of the steppe, the saffron milk of Persia, the spiced chai of India, And now this, rice, tea, patience. Maybe he's right. You wander out to the street after finishing your bowl. Steam curls from every doorway. A man sells sesame pancakes fried to golden crispness. Another grills scallion buns that pop and sizzle. You buy one of each. Because science. The scallions hit first, sharp and green. Then the oil, rich and hot. It's portable joy, ideal for a traveler. Mainstream fact. The silk routes weren't just highways for goods. They were breakfast incubators. Archaeological digs near Turfan have uncovered evidence of millet porridge, dumplings, and even fried dough, suggesting morning markets thrived here over 1200 years ago. The bones of civilization are often breadcrumbs. A boy races by carrying bamboo baskets taller than himself. He shouts, "Baozi! Hot Baozi!" His voice echoes down the alley. You buy one, soft, pillowy, filled with pork and scallions. You burn your tongue again. You regret nothing again. The house bell rings, marking mid-morning. You glance around. Workers, monks, merchants, scholars, all eating side by side, each with their own bowl, each lost in thought. Breakfast as equalizer. Momentary pause in the churn of empire. A quirky sight catches your eye. A man walking backward while balancing a tray of pastries on his head, calling out prices without missing a step. Someone tells you he's famous in the town, known for never spilling a bun in 30 years. You wonder if he started as a street performer, or simply a very determined baker. The scholar pays for both your meals before you can protest. Hospitality, he insists. On the road, it always returns. You thank him, bow slightly, and promise to remember. As you walk back toward the caravan, you pass a shrine by the roadside. Offerings sit neatly arranged. Oranges, tea, and small bowls of rice porridge. Even the spirits, it seems, expect breakfast. You whisper a quiet wish for safe passage, and step away, your reflection rippling briefly in the temple's bronze bell. The road west gleams faintly under the morning sun. Behind you, laughter and clinking bowls fade into the hum of distant voices. Ahead, mountains rise again, pale blue against the horizon. You take one last look at the tea house, now a blur of steam and memory, and feel an odd warmth spread through you, not just from food, but from the way mornings always seem to promise kindness. You take a breath, savor the lingering scent of sesame oil and tea, and start walking. The road climbs higher, curling into mountains that slice the clouds. The air thins until every breath feels like sipping glass, and your voice comes out as fog. The path to Tibet is steep, stone-colored, and strangely quiet. No market chatter, no spice sellers, only the sound of yak bells clanging in the cold. You wrap your robe tighter and follow the smell of smoke drifting from a monastery perched on the cliff. When you finally step inside, the world changes texture. The air is thick with incense and butter. Monks move slowly, silent except for the rustle of robes. You're ushered to a wooden bench near the hearth, where a cauldron the size of a bathtub simmers. Someone ladles a creamy liquid into a cup and hands it to you with both hands. You nod, grateful and freezing. You take a cautious sip. It's hot, salty, oily, and glorious. Butter tea, or, as they call it, po cha. The taste surprises you. Half broth, half comfort. The yak butter coats your tongue. The tea's salt cuts the edge, and suddenly your shivering stops. You exhale steam, heart unclenching in the warmth. It's not a delicate flavor, but in this altitude, delicacy is overrated. A monk with a face like folded parchment smiles. Good. Yes? You nod. Very good, you manage. He laughs softly. It grows on you, he says. Like altitude, sickness. Mainstream historical fact. Butter tea has been part of Tibetan life for over a millennium. Likely introduced from Chinese brick tea, blended with the region's butter-rich dairy tradition. It's not just breakfast. It's medicine, fuel, and social glue. Without it, the body rebels against the mountain. The monk gestures toward a table where others sit cross-legged, dipping barley dough into their tea. You watch as they knead the dough with their fingers, forming little rolls before eating them in one bite. You're offered some too. It's called tsampa, roasted barley flour mixed with butter tea until it forms a paste. It tastes nutty and smoky, the kind of food that feels engineered for survival. Historians still argue whether tsampa originated in Tibet or in the barley fields of ancient Sichuan. Either way, it became the portable breakfast of choice for herders and pilgrims, a power bar born of necessity. You take another bite, and suddenly understand how people cross mountains on this diet alone. The wind outside howls, pressing against the monastery walls. Inside, the tea continues to flow, thick as melted gold. You notice how the monks treat refilling your cup as a silent blessing. No asking, no ceremony, just a quiet pour and a nod. The rhythm feels sacred, like breathing. Someone places a bowl of dried yak cheese beside you. Hard as stone, nearly impossible to bite. You try anyway, and nearly lose a tooth. A young monk grins, showing his own chipped incisor. You get used to it, he says proudly. You decide to admire from afar. A quirky tidbit. According to travelers' accounts, Tibetan monks once used butter, not only in tea but to polish statues, light lamps, and moisturize skin against windburn. The monastery smelled perpetually of dairy, incense, and devotion. A trinity of survival scents. Outside, the morning unfolds in silence. Snow catches sunlight, blindingly bright. A line of pilgrims trudges along the distant ridge, prayer flags snapping in the wind like tiny hymns. You sip more tea and watch them move, dots of color across a white sea. The elder monk beside you speaks softly. Butter tea reminds you that life is small, he says. The mountains drink your strength, so you drink theirs. He points to the steaming pot. This is how. You drink again, feeling the heat spread down to your fingertips. The salt, the fat, the tea. All of it anchoring you to the moment. Breakfast, stripped to its essence. Warmth against the cold. Mainstream fact. The tea used here comes in bricks, dense as stone. Travelers along the silk routes once traded them as currency. In some markets, a single brick of high-quality tea could buy a horse. You glance at your cup and smirk. Not bad for liquid money. Historians still debate when Tibet adopted this blend of Chinese and Himalayan influences. Some credit the Tang dynasty's alliances through Princess Wenxing's marriage to a Tibetan king. Others point to older trade ties through Nepal. Either way, every sip you take is history steeped in milk and salt. A young monk approaches with a small wooden bowl. Inside are dried fruits, raisins, bits of apricot, even a few shards of sugar. Festival, he explains. We share sweetness when guests arrive. You thank him, popping one piece into your mouth. The sugar cracks like snow underfoot. Sweet and salt, yin and yang. Perfectly balanced. The bell rings somewhere deep within the monastery, a sound that seems to travel through stone. Monks rise silently, filing toward the prayer hall. You follow, your cup still warm in your hands. Inside, the chanting begins. A low, rolling thunder of voices blending into one vibration. You sit on the floor, the sound filling your chest until you forget where your breath ends and theirs begins. You realize that breakfast here isn't a pause before the day. It is the day. Butter tea as devotion, barley as gratitude, silence as spice. When the chanting ends, the monks smile faintly and return to their work. You step outside into the blinding light. The wind stings your cheeks, but you're warm from within. You stand on the monastery steps, looking out across the world's rooftop, steam still rising from your cup. A pilgrim passes by, murmuring a greeting, a string of prayer beads swinging from his hand. He nods towards your tea. "You'll never leave Tibet without it," he says. You believe him. You take one final sip, letting the butter coat your lips. It tastes of endurance, altitude, and quiet faith. Below, the valley curls in silver mist. Above, the sky opens endlessly. You exhale, your breath mingling with the mountains. And for a moment, between the salt of the tea and the thinness of the air, you feel what the monks mean. Warmth isn't a thing you drink. It's something you keep alive. By the time you descend from the peaks, the wind carries a new smell, salt and sweetness, both familiar and strange. You follow the river westward, watching it widen into plains that glitter beneath the morning sun. The land flattens, and soon, towers rise ahead, slender minarets, tiled domes, and walls that glow in shades of gold and blue. Constantinople, the world's hinge, where Asia's dust meets Europe's dawn. You arrive before the city's gates just as the first call to prayer floats over the rooftops. Seagulls cry overhead, merchants yawn awake, and bakeries already breathe heat into the cool air. You join a crowd moving toward the market square. Here, breakfast smells like ambition, like butter melting over wealth. You pass through narrow alleys, past stalls hung with fabrics, spices, and brass lamps. And then you see it, an open bakery, its arched doorway spilling light. Inside, the bakers move in rhythm, pulling out coiled pastries glistening with honey. They stack them on silver trays, steam rising in slow spirals. You're handed one without question. You bite. Layers of flaky dough shatter against your teeth, revealing nuts, sugar, and a faint trace of rose water. Baklava, or at least its great-grandparent. Historians still argue whether this delicacy was first Persian, Greek, or Turkish, each side claiming the right to sweetness. But here in Byzantium's heart, it's simply breakfast for anyone who can afford it. You take another bite and immediately understand why empires are built on sugar. At a nearby stall, a man in a long robe stirs a pot of wheat pudding scented with cinnamon. He calls it kaliva, a mixture of grains, honey, and fruit usually reserved for feasts and funerals. But also, he says, for mornings that need blessing. You accept a bowl. The wheat's chewiness surprises you. It tastes like harvest and memory. Mainstream historical fact. Byzantium inherited and remixed the food traditions of Persia, Greece, and Rome. Breakfast here, known as akritisma, once meant nothing more than bread dipped in wine or olive oil. But by the 10th century, with trade booming along the silk routes, morning tables began to sparkle. Spices, sugar, almonds, and coffee-like brews, all finding their way into the imperial kitchens. You sit on a low stone wall watching the market wake. A fisherman shouts about his catch. Monks hurry past in brown robes, and a girl sells sesame rings still hot from the oven. You buy one. It's chewy, warm, slightly sweet. She calls it kulori, the ancestor of modern bagels. You grin. Breakfast history really is a carb circle. Someone offers you a cup of dark liquid, thick, bitter, and aromatic. It's kawa, coffee's earliest form, brought here by merchants from Yemen. The taste is intense, almost smoky, nothing like the smooth blends you know. You take a second sip and feel it, alertness blooming in your chest like a secret. Liquid gold, says the merchant, winking. Keeps you awake through politics. He's not wrong. The city hums with layers of flavor. You wander past a cafe where scholars debate theology over steaming cups, their words rising like steam. Historians still argue whether these early Byzantine coffeehouses were truly the ancestors of modern ones. But the vibe is unmistakable. Caffeine, conversation, and mild existential panic. Inside another tavern, a man flips eggs into a pan of olive oil, sprinkling herbs and crumbled cheese. The result looks familiar. Scrambled, rustic, irresistible. He calls it saganaki, but it feels suspiciously like the great-grandfather of the modern omelette. You eat it with crusty bread, each bite humming with thyme and lemon. A quirky tidbit. Imperial servants once served the emperor's morning egg with powdered gold on top, believing it purified the body. You stare at your plate and mutter, "Good thing I'm not royalty." My stomach can't afford that much sparkle. Beyond the walls, the harbor gleams. Ships unload sacks of pepper, silk, and sugar. Cargo from lands you've already crossed. You watch sailors pour out handfuls of cinnamon as proof of trade. The air thickens with spice, as if the whole city were cooking breakfast together. A group of children sits nearby, eating barley cakes and honey. One offers you a piece. You accept. The honey glues your fingers together, sticky proof that generosity transcends language. Mainstream fact. Constantinople's kitchens were laboratories of cultural fusion. Recipes blended Persian sweetness, Arab spice, and Greek grain. Even the utensils told stories. Porcelain from China, copper pans from Anatolia, glass jars from Syria. Breakfast here was a map you could eat. You follow a narrow lane toward the Hagia Sophia, its dome catching the sunlight like a second sunrise. Near the steps, a woman sells dried fruit and spiced nuts from a basket. You buy a handful. Apricots, figs, almonds dusted with cinnamon. She nods, approvingly. Good for the mind, she says. You pop a fig into your mouth and feel its seeds crunch like tiny fireworks. Historians still debate whether Byzantines considered breakfast proper or indulgent. Some ascetics called it a temptation for the weak stomach. Yet, here, surrounded by laughter and the smell of bread, it's hard to imagine anyone refusing it willingly. You pause by the water's edge. Fishermen fry small silver fish on portable braziers, sprinkling them with vinegar and herbs. You taste one, crisp and salty, the sea itself condensed into a bite. A man nearby dips his into wine and nods approvingly. For courage, he declares. You raise your imaginary cup. To courage and carbs, you whisper. The breeze off the Bosporus carries sounds of bells, prayers, and hammers. Across the strait, Asia shimmers in the haze. You realize this city truly is a hinge, half dream, half market, forever awake. A monk passes by with a small loaf of bread marked with a cross. He breaks it, offers half to you. Even emperors need to start the day humbly, he says. You smile, remembering the same line from the Persian storyteller. Funny how wisdom, like trade, travels without needing translation. You sit together for a moment in silence, sharing bread as ships drift past. The crust crackles, the air smells of sea and sugar. and for a heartbeat, the whole world feels balanced between continents and centuries. When the monk leaves, you stand, brushing crumbs from your hands. The city behind you buzzes louder now, merchants shouting, bells clanging. You take one last look at the harbor, a mirror of gold and smoke, and start walking toward the western road. As you go, you can still taste the honey on your lips, still feel the warmth of the tea, still hear the distant rhythm of bakers' hands shaping dough. Constantinople fades behind you, but its breakfasts stay. The sweetness of empire, the salt of survival, and the quiet truth that every dawn, no matter how grand, begins with someone lighting a stove. You cross from the marble glow of Byzantium into the sun-bleached lands of the eastern Mediterranean. The wind tastes of salt and olives, and the road ahead is lined with groves that shimmer silver green beneath a waking sky. The pace of life changes here. Mornings are slower, full of prayer and preparation, a rhythm stitched together by the smell of bread baking in stone domes. Your caravan winds through narrow lanes toward Damascus. The first sounds of day, donkeys braying, vendors unbolting shutters, echo through streets paved smooth by centuries of footsteps. A baker waves you closer, pulling round loaves from his clay oven. The bread puffs like balloons, each one collapsing in on itself with a soft sigh as it cools. You buy one, still hot, and the heat pricks your palms through the cloth. You tear the loaf open. Steam escapes, carrying the smell of toasted wheat. The baker sprinkles a mix of crushed thyme, sesame, and salt onto the torn surface. Za'atar, he says simply. You taste it, earthy, tangy, bright with sumac, and understand why mornings in the Levant rarely need anything else. At a nearby stall, a woman pours golden olive oil from a clay jug into small dishes. People dip bread, talk, argue softly about weather and politics. One man gestures toward the sky, declaring it will rain by noon. Another swears the season has turned early. You watch the olive oil shimmer in the sun, each droplet catching light like liquid glass. Mainstream historical fact: the olive tree has been cultivated in these hills for over 6,000 years, and its oil served as food, fuel, and faith. Even the Quran and the Bible praise it. Here, to eat bread with oil and za'atar is to eat history. Unchanged, undefeated, endlessly shared. A boy carries a basket of fresh cucumbers and tomatoes. He slices them quickly, adds a drizzle of oil, a sprinkle of salt, and hands you a makeshift salad on flatbread. It's crisp and simple. The taste so fresh it feels like a sunrise on your tongue. Breakfast of prophets, he boasts, grinning. Historians still argue whether the Levantine breakfast as we know it, spreads, breads, small plates, evolved from caravan meals or from urban hospitality. Either way, it's communal by design. No single dish dominates. Everything is meant to be passed, dipped, shared. You settle at a low table near the edge of the market. Plates appear like magic. Bowls of creamy hummus dusted with paprika, labneh thick as butter, olives both black and green, pickles sharp enough to wake the dead. Someone adds a basket of bread to the middle and gestures for you to join. You do, gladly. The hummus melts in your mouth. Smooth, nutty, the lemon sharp and cleansing. You scoop labneh next, its tang cooled by mint leaves. Around you, conversation flows easily. Travelers trading routes, scholars reciting lines of poetry, merchants calculating how many camels equal a barrel of saffron. A man across the table laughs and says, "In this city you can trade a poem for a meal." You test that theory, reciting a clumsy verse about bread and gratitude. Table erupts in applause and laughter. Someone refills your cup with thick Arabic coffee as a reward. The coffee here is darker than night and twice as intense. Brewed with cardamom, it hits the senses in layers. Bitter first, then floral, then sweet at the end. The host explains that each cup should be small, so you always want more. You nod, trembling slightly. Mainstream historians trace Arabic coffee to Yemen in the 15th century, spreading north through trade routes that passed right through Damascus and Aleppo. From here it leapt to Cairo, Istanbul and Venice, waking the world one jittery merchant at a time. A quirky tidbit: some early clerics tried to ban coffee, claiming it caused unholy wakefulness, but Sufi mystics defended it fiercely, insisting it aided night prayers. You glance at your own cup, half gone already, and think if this is sin, it's a very productive one. The host gestures toward another dish, this one a reddish spread glistening with oil. Muhammara, he says proudly. It's made of roasted peppers, walnuts, and pomegranate molasses. You taste it and feel an entire orchard burst behind your eyes. Sweet, smoky, tart. You laugh in disbelief. The man beams. That's Aleppo in a bite. The market hums louder now. A spice vendor crushes cumin under a stone, releasing its scent into the air. You hear the rhythmic clang of metalworkers, the distant chant from a nearby mosque calling the faithful to prayer. The mix of sound and scent feels almost musical. Historians still debate how much of this cuisine was born here versus imported along the silk routes. The sesame in your tahini may have traveled from India, the chickpeas from Anatolia, the lemons from Egypt, but here they meet and make sense. Like travelers sharing a story at dawn. A woman brings over a plate of falafel, crisp on the outside, soft within. You bite into one, and it crunches like applause. The herbs sing. Cilantro, parsley, coriander. She pours you another coffee. You begin to wonder if anyone here ever truly stops refilling cups. She sits beside you, dipping bread into labneh. Every morning, she says. The city wakes with olive oil. You glance at the crowd, hands dipping, sharing, passing plates, and realize she's right. The oil is the sun. Everyone eats together. A gust of wind carries the smell of fresh bread through the alley. You follow it instinctively, finding a baker brushing sesame onto loaves before sliding them into a dome oven. The heat roars out in waves. He laughs as you step back from it. Don't fear the fire, he says. Fear a day that begins without bread. A quirky local superstition floats to mind. In some villages, people kiss dropped bread before throwing it away, to apologize to the grain itself. You watch as a child accidentally steps on a crust, then quickly kisses his fingertips and touches his forehead. Reverence baked into habit. You finish your meal with a sweet, tiny rolls of filo, stuffed with pistachio and drenched in syrup. They stick to your fingers. You lick them clean without shame. The sugar hums through you like sunlight. As the morning wanes, you stand, stretching. The bazaar pulses louder now. Textiles unfurled, spices traded, shouts echoing beneath the arches. You look around and realize breakfast here never truly ends. People just change tables. You tuck a piece of warm bread into your pouch for the road and nod to the baker. He smiles. For luck, he says. Bread always brings you home. You walk toward the western gate. Behind you, the air carries one last wave of scent. Thyme, oil, and roasted sesame. The kind of perfume no empire can replicate. The kind that turns hunger into history. By the time the Levant's olive groves fade behind you, the sea begins to whisper again. You can smell it before you see it. Salt, tar, and citrus. The silk roots have split and braided countless times, but here, along the Mediterranean rim, they reunite. Traders follow the wind now instead of the camel. The morning chorus changes from roosters to gulls. You wake aboard a small ship, anchored off Alexandria. The wooden deck creaks beneath you, and a sailor's shout cuts through the dawn. Someone is frying something below deck. The smell is both foreign and promising. Breakfast at sea, you realize, is less a ritual and more an improvisation. A sailor appears with a dented copper pan filled with eggs, onions, and tomatoes simmered together. "Shakshuka," he announces proudly. You recognize some of the flavors from your Levantine breakfasts: spice, sweetness, smoke. But the sea adds something new. You take a spoonful straight from the pan. The eggs are tender, the tomatoes bright, the heat gentle. It's chaos that somehow tastes organized. Historians still argue whether shakshuka began in North Africa, the Levant, or the Andalusian coast. The dish refuses to pledge allegiance, much like the sailors who cook it. You mop up the sauce with torn bread, earning an approving nod from the captain. The ship rocks gently. Another sailor brings you olives and a wedge of hard cheese wrapped in cloth. He says it came from Crete. Someone else adds a handful of dates and nuts from the last port. Breakfast by collage. Whatever survived the journey becomes the meal. Mainstream fact. The Mediterranean was a breakfast superhighway long before the term Silk Road existed. Phoenician traders spread olives and grapes westward. Arabs later carried coffee and sugar north. Venetian merchants sent everything they could back home for profit. Every ship carried both cargo and recipes. You lean against the railing, cup of spiced tea in hand. The water glitters like hammered glass. The sun rises behind the lighthouse of Pharos, its shadow slicing the waves. A sailor points. "That's where we tell time," he says. "When the shadow hits the deck, you eat. It's as good a system as any." You sip your tea. Strong, laced with mint and a hint of orange peel. The warmth cuts the sea chill. The mint, he tells you, grows on deck in a cracked pot. You look down and see it, brave and green, curling in the salt air. Humanity's obsession with herbs apparently has no altitude or geography limits. When the ship docks in Alexandria, the air thickens again with spice and noise. The port smells of salt fish, tar, and freshly baked bread. You follow a crowd to a row of food stalls under a canvas awning. There, a woman in a blue shawl is stirring a pot of something porridge-like. You lean closer. "For mesdames," she says, "stewed fava beans, garlic, lemon, and olive oil." She ladles it into a bowl, topping it with chopped parsley and a hard-boiled egg. The first spoonful is earthy and rich, both breakfast and history lesson. Egyptians have been eating full since the time of the pharaohs. Archaeologists even found remnants of fava beans in ancient tombs. You think about that while chewing. 4,000 years of people starting their day with the same humble comfort. Historians still debate whether full mesdames spread outward from Egypt through trade or arrived independently in nearby ports. Either way, it became the backbone of morning markets from Cairo to Beirut, proof that the simplest ingredients travel the farthest. You sit beside fishermen, mending their nets. They eat from the same pot, scooping with torn flatbread, their fingers shining with oil. One of them passes you a small wedge of lemon. "Always this," he says. "Without it, the day sleeps." You squeeze it over your bowl and immediately understand brightness cuts fatigue better than caffeine. A quirky tidbit. Roman soldiers stationed along this coast once ate a breakfast strikingly similar to full, boiled beans mixed with vinegar and herbs. Some historians argue the dish may have traveled not east to west, but the other way around, carried by sailors who preferred a warm meal to stale rations. A harbor bustles around you. Camels carrying salt, carts full of oranges, sailors shouting in half a dozen languages. A vendor pushes past with a tray of sesame pastries glazed in syrup. You buy one, biting into the sticky spiral while trying not to lose your teeth. He laughs and offers a simpler one. Round, flaky, filled with dates. You taste it and nearly cry. "My grandmother made these," he says proudly. Or maybe it was your grandmother. The sea forgets. You wander inland as the day warms. The market overflows with pomegranates, almonds, and tiny cups of thick black coffee. A boy insists you try one. The bitterness shocks you awake. You chase it with a sweet called basbousa, semolina cake drenched in honey. The balance is perfect, like apology and forgiveness in one bite. Mainstream historians note that sugar refinement spread rapidly through these coastal trade routes. Before long, even sailors who couldn't afford silk could afford a spoonful of sweetness. That single change reshaped breakfast forever. Sweets moved from luxury to habit. You reach a shaded courtyard where a group of sailors and traders gather for their morning meal. There's bread, cheese, olives, and something new. Orange slices sprinkled with cinnamon. You try it, skeptical at first. The flavor bursts. Cool, spicy, alive. You wonder why no one warned you that fruit could flirt. Historians still argue whether citrus first reached this coast from Persia or India. What's certain is that by the Middle Ages, oranges became the morning jewel of the Mediterranean, a luxury that slowly turned domestic. By the time Venetians sailed home with crates of them, the idea of fresh fruit for breakfast had quietly conquered the world. A sailor beside you chews thoughtfully and says, "Breakfast is the only time men are honest." You raise an eyebrow. He grins. No one lies before coffee. You decide he's probably right. You spend a few hours helping patch nets, your hands sticky with rope tar and orange juice. The morning passes lazily. A breeze carries the scent of baking bread and roasting nuts from the market beyond the dock. You close your eyes, listening to the sea slap the hulls, the hum of a city that has fed travelers since time began. The sun climbs, dazzling on the waves. Someone calls out that it's nearly time to sail. You rise, wiping your hands, and tuck a few leftover pastries into your pouch. The vendor waves goodbye, shouting, "Next time, try the pistachio ones." As the ship pulls away, you watch the city recede, its towers glowing white, its harbor dotted with sails like gulls. The taste of full and lemon lingers on your tongue, mingling with salt air. You lean on the railing again, the horizon stretching wide and gold. Somewhere to the north lies Venice, and beyond that, Europe's awakening hunger. The silk routes are almost done with you, but breakfast, you realize, still has miles to travel. The sea quiets as your ship glides north, leaving the golden haze of Alexandria behind. For days, you follow the curve of the Mediterranean, past Crete, Sicily, and the narrow mouth that leads toward the Adriatic. The mornings blur together. Bread, salt, citrus, wind. At last you step ashore in Venice. Dawn feels heavier, wetter. The air smells of brine and yeast, and the bells from St. Mark's ring like the sound of civilization stretching its arms after a long sleep. You walk the narrow alleys where water laps against stone. Breakfast here is already awake. Bakers open their shutters, laying out trays of rolls that gleam with egg wash and sugar. Gondoliers gulp coffee from tin cups. Pigeons strut like minor nobles between the tables. You buy a roll filled with almond paste, soft, sweet, unmistakably Eastern in flavor. The merchant grins when he sees your face. Persian recipe, he says. Venetian perfection. Historians still argue whether Venice was the first true European city to absorb the silk route's morning habits, but its bakeries tell no lies. The spices, the sugar, even the idea of eating sweetness at dawn. All imported, all transformed. A bell tolls again as you wander toward the market square. Fishermen unload crates of anchovies and clams. The smell, sharp and alive. You stop at a stall where a woman is stirring polenta over a fire. She offers you a small bowl with grated cheese and butter swirling on top. It's humble, filling, and warm. Breakfast for workers, she says, not nobles. You nod, grateful. After weeks of spiced milk and porridge, the simplicity feels almost decadent. A sailor beside you tears a hunk of bread, dips it in wine, and calls it a meal. He catches your curious glance and shrugs. It's what my father did, and his before him. Wine makes the day honest. You smile. Another culture where morning buzz doubles as blessing. Mainstream historical fact. In medieval Europe, breakfast was once viewed with suspicion. Many clerics considered eating early a sign of greed or weakness. Only laborers and children were expected to need it. Yet, the silk route slowly changed. That tea, sugar, coffee, and new grains creeping west, until even monks began breaking fast before noon. You wander past the spice market, where merchants shout prices for pepper, cinnamon, and nutmeg. The smell alone is dizzying. One vendor hands you a small sweet, a fried pastry dusted with sugar and clove. For luck, he says. You bite into it, the crunch echoing like applause. The flavors are unmistakably Eastern. India, Persia, Arabia. Yet now they belong to Europe. A group of travelers gathers at a nearby cafe, sipping a dark brew poured from small copper pots. Coffee again, stronger, smoother, a little more civilized. The merchant says it came by sea from the Ottoman ports. You join them, savoring the bitter warmth, the way it clears the fog from your head. Someone jokes that this drink will either make men wise or ruin their sleep forever. You think it's already done both. Historians still argue which European city first embraced coffee culture. Venice, Vienna, or London. But here, in this sunlit square, you can see the beginning. The silk routes didn't just trade goods. They traded awakenings. You stroll through a bakery filled with experiments. Loaves braided with saffron, biscuits perfumed with rosewater, small crescent rolls glazed in butter. The baker calls them kipferl, little horns of dough. You tear one apart. Steam rises in soft curls. It's tender, layered, impossibly delicate. Somewhere, in the centuries ahead, this will evolve into the croissant. He tells you he learned the folding technique from an Armenian friend, who in turn learned it from a Persian pastry maker. Every fold, he says, is a journey. You take another bite and think of the road still echoing in your bones. Quirky tidbit. Some chroniclers claim the early kipferl were baked to celebrate victories over the Ottomans, the crescent shape symbolizing the conquered flag. But others argue that bakers simply liked the shape. Historians still debate this with more passion than most people reserve for politics. As you eat, a group of apprentices delivers baskets of warm rolls to the docks. You follow them, passing workshops where glassmakers blow shimmering bubbles into shape. The smell of yeast and smoke follows you everywhere. Venice, you realize, doesn't wake. It simmers. A merchant you recognize from the ship waves you over. He's eating cold fish and bread drizzled with lemon. You join him, dipping your own piece of bread into the brine. It's sharp, refreshing, oddly addictive. Breakfast of survivors, he says. You nod, half in agreement, half in admiration for his stomach. Mainstream fact. By the 14th century, European ports like Venice had become breakfast melting pots. Fishermen ate lentil stew, inherited from Greek sailors, while nobles favored saffron pastries inspired by Persian sweets. Even the humble bowl of oatmeal carried echoes of the grains once traded through Samarkand and Kashgar. You finish your bread, then wander toward a quieter alley where a small tavern offers something called Cafe Nero. Black coffee without sugar. You sip carefully. It's bitter, almost punishing, but it sharpens your thoughts. The owner leans over and says, "The monks drink it before prayer. Keeps the devil sleepy." You nearly spit it out laughing. Historians still debate whether Europe's growing caffeine obsession reflected faith or fatigue. You suspect it was both. After centuries of fasting mornings, the continent had discovered alertness and decided never to let it go. The air grows warmer. Sunlight turns the canals gold. Somewhere nearby, church bells blend with the clang of shipyard hammers. Breakfast dishes empty, tables clear, but conversation lingers. The Venetian morning feels like a rehearsal for modernity. Quick, caffeinated, connected. You stand on a bridge overlooking the Grand Canal. Gondoliers call out, their voices bouncing between palaces. The smell of sugar and coffee drifts up from the cafes below. You think of all the mornings you've walked through. The barley porridge by the river, the arag on the steppe, the saffron eggs of Persia, the chai and dim sum, the butter tea, the olive oil, and now this, sweet rolls, and bitter coffee. The silk roots have unraveled behind you, but the flavors still braid together. Every cup, every loaf, every shared dawn carries echoes of the same question. How shall we begin again today? A church bell tolls once more, and the square floods with light. You watch as a baker pulls another tray of pastries from the oven, their golden surfaces reflecting the morning sun, like a blessing. You take one last bite of almond pastry, still warm, and whisper to yourself, even Europe wakes to the east. Then, you turn from the water, the taste of sweetness lingering, like a memory of every road you've traveled. You follow the wind north through green fields and quiet forests, leaving the marble canals of Venice behind. The road narrows into dirt and mist, lined with cottages that smell of damp bread and chimney smoke. The silk roads, once blazing with caravans and spices, now feel like a fading hum in the background. But their echoes are everywhere. In the clatter of mugs, in the hiss of kettles, in the whisper of sugar melting into morning. You stop at an inn halfway between Vienna and Prague, where the sky is the color of pewter and the air promises rain. The sign outside creaks with the wind, an iron coffee pot painted on wood. Inside, the light is dim and honey-colored. Travelers huddle around tables, warming their hands on cups that smell of roasted beans. You sit down, order what everyone else is having, and watch as the innkeeper works her small miracle. She pours boiling water through a linen bag stuffed with crushed beans, the liquid trickling into cups as black as ink. Coffee again, but this time smoother, richer, disciplined. She slides one toward you and smiles. "From the Turks," she says. "Everything good finds its way here eventually." You sip. It's strong, but balanced, laced with sugar and just enough milk to soften the edge. The taste feels both ancient and new. How? Historians still argue which army first brought coffee into Europe's heart. Ottoman soldiers at Vienna's gates, or merchants sneaking it through Balkan trade. Either way, by now it's everywhere, turning sleepy towns into conversation hubs. At the next table, a pair of merchants break bread together. Literally. One pulls apart a small golden roll. Flaky, layered, suspiciously crescent-shaped. and dips it into his coffee. You recognize the form immediately. We call them kipferl, he says. But the French are making their own version. More butter. He shrugs. More arrogance too, perhaps. You laugh softly. The road has turned from silk to sugar, from spice to caffeine. Breakfast is no longer about survival. It's about ritual. The inn fills with chatter, laughter, and the faint crackle of a hearth. You smell something baking, sweet and sharp at once. The innkeeper returns with a slice of warm bread, thickly spread with jam the color of garnet. Plum, she says, proud as a queen. My mother's recipe. The sugar came by ship from far away. You take a bite. The crust is firm, the jam tart and luxurious. Every chew tastes of trade routes and patient hands. Mainstream historical fact. By the 17th century, sugar plantations in the colonies had turned Europe's mornings into indulgence. What began as a spice became an expectation. The Silk Road's sweet legacy had found its way into every cup and loaf, gilded by empire. Outside, the rain starts, a steady drumming that makes the world smell clean. The travelers keep eating. A scholar nearby scribbles notes about coffee houses in London. A soldier complains that beer breakfasts are being replaced by foreign bean juice. You smirk. Progress rarely happens quietly. Historians still debate whether coffee houses birthed the Enlightenment or just louder arguments. But you can see their power here. The inn feels like an early prototype, ideas swirling faster than spoons in cups. A farmer at the bar lifts his mug and says, "Before coffee, I needed prayer to start the day. Now I just need this." The room laughs. You do too. Half in agreement, half in awe. You notice a pot simmering by the hearth. Inside, oats bubble gently, perfumed with cinnamon and apple slices. The innkeeper stirs it, humming. She ladles some into a bowl for a child, who sprinkles sugar on top. You watch, recognizing the porridge's lineage. Barley by the river, millet on the steppe, rice in China. The grains have changed names, but not purpose. Warm, simple, shared. A quirky tidbit surfaces. One early English traveler complained that oatmeal was fit only for horses. The Scots, upon hearing this, famously replied, "That's why England has better horses, and Scotland better men." You chuckle into your coffee. Breakfast feuds are apparently eternal. The rain thickens. Candles flicker. Someone opens a crate of oranges just arrived from the coast. The scent transforms the room. Bright, clean, impossible not to smile at. A child bites into one, juice spilling down his chin, and the room cheers as if it's a small miracle. Maybe it is. Mainstream fact. Citrus, sugar, coffee, cocoa, all collided in this era, reshaping what mornings meant. The silk routes had woven into colonial networks, each spoonful of sweetness carrying the weight of ships, sails, and unseen hands. The world was awake now, and addicted to staying that way. You finish your coffee and watch as the innkeeper refills cups without being asked. "If everyone starts the day kind," she says, "perhaps they'll argue less later." You nod. Hope, like caffeine, is easy to refill. Historians still argue whether these early European breakfasts united people or simply stratified them. Workers with porridge, nobles with pastries. But sitting here, everyone seems the same. Sleepy, grateful, halfway between dream and duty. You step outside once the rain slows. The air is cold and clean, the road slick and shining. You walk through the village, past small houses where chimney smoke smells faintly of sugar and yeast. In one window, you spot a woman brushing melted butter over rows of rolls. She waves when she catches you watching, and for a second, the whole world feels domestic. The bells chime again, distant but steady. The day's trade will start soon. Barrels to roll, carts to load, letters to send. You tuck the last piece of roll into your pocket, its sweetness sticking to your fingers. Europe is awake now, and you with it. You think of how far breakfast has come, from clay pots by the yellow river to coffee cups in candlelight, from fermented milk to polished silver spoons. And still, the same truth holds. Warmth, grain, sweetness, conversation. The world keeps changing its ingredients, but never its reasons. As you reach the hill outside the village, dawn cracks fully open. The clouds part just enough for a blade of sunlight to strike the wet road. You breathe in deep, the smell of rain, yeast, and smoke blending into something that could almost be peace. You whisper, half to yourself. The Silk Road never ended. It just learned to make espresso. Morning creeps softly through your final inn window, a pale, forgiving light that paints everything silver. You've wandered half the world by now, carried on breadcrumbs and steam, and each sunrise has offered another bowl, another story. This one smells faintly of toast and oranges, the unmistakable perfume of modern life waking up. You sit up slowly, still wrapped in the rhythm of the road, realizing you've arrived not at a destination, but in the present. A radio hums somewhere downstairs. The innkeeper's daughter is singing off-key to a pop song, while butter melts on a griddle. The floorboards creak, and you catch the scent of coffee. Familiar, steady, the global heartbeat that's replaced the sound of caravan bells. You head down, smiling. Breakfast today looks both ordinary and miraculous. There's toast jam, a soft-boiled egg, a pot of coffee. Someone reads a newspaper beside you. Another scrolls on a phone, both tracing the same unconscious ritual that began with congee pots and millet fires. You pour yourself a cup, the steam curling upward, and suddenly every morning you've traveled through feels present in this one. The silk routes never really vanished. They just went digital. Coffee beans from Ethiopia, sugar from Brazil, oranges from Spain, spices from India. You could fit the entire ancient map on your grocery receipt. The innkeeper sets down a small bowl of yogurt topped with honey and oats. Our continental special, she says proudly. You grin. It's the same combination the Scythians once carried in leather pouches, only now served in glass. You take a bite, and it tastes like the road still rolling under you. Creamy, tart, ancient, familiar. Mainstream historical fact. By the 20th century, breakfast had become a global institution. Tea and toast in London, croissants in Paris, pancakes in America, rice porridge in Seoul. Centuries of trading routes and colonial currents fused into one shared vocabulary of comfort. Historians still argue whether globalization destroyed or deepened these traditions. Did the Silk Road's diversity fade into uniformity? Or did the world simply start sharing its recipes faster? You sip your coffee, thinking maybe both are true. Maybe connection always comes with compromise. A few travelers at another table debate whether avocado toast counts as innovation or appropriation. You laugh quietly. Even that argument, in its way, belongs to the same lineage. Borrowed ingredients, blended cultures, the eternal hunger to start anew. Outside, rain taps gently against the window. Cars hiss down wet streets. The smell of baking bread drifts from a cafe across the square. You can almost hear the old caravan songs hidden beneath the modern city noise. Footsteps on sand, bells in fog, voices swapping spice for story. You glance at your plate. Toast golden as Samarkand sunrise, butter soft as Persian dawn. jam glinting red like pomegranate seeds from Damascus. Everything on it is a memory, disguised as convenience. A quirky tidbit slips into your mind. In the 1950s, American cereal ads called breakfast the most important meal of the day, a slogan that traces philosophically, if not factually, back to monastic orders on the Silk Road who treated the morning meal as spiritual hygiene. Different century, same marketing genius. You finish your yogurt and pour another cup of coffee. The innkeeper switches the radio to a softer song. Something jazzy, looping, almost hypnotic. You find yourself swaying slightly, the melody merging with the slow hum of the world outside. Breakfast now happens everywhere, at every hour. Night shift workers eat it at dusk. Students at midnight. In some cafe half a world away, someone's stirring milk into chai, while another fries eggs in olive oil at dawn. The silk routes have turned into circuits of light, but the ritual endures. Gather warmth, feed hope, face the day. You lean back, eyes half closed. The clink of dishes fades, replaced by the quiet rhythm of rain and the low hum of traffic. For a fleeting second, the centuries collapse completely. You can see them all. The herder churning arag, the Persian baker glazing bread, the Indian vendor pouring chai, the monk steeping butter tea, the Venetian grinding beans, the modern barista pressing espresso. Different hands, same dawn. Historians still argue what breakfast really means: ritual, refueling, or reflection. But maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it's just the daily reminder that we are still here, still moving, still able to make something warm before the world begins demanding again. You finish your coffee and watch the steam twist upward, vanishing into the morning light. You could keep traveling forever, tracing how each city greets the sun. But you realize the Silk Road has already arrived inside you. Every smell, every bite, every shared moment over a bowl or a cup is a map of connection. And so, as the inn fills with quiet chatter and the rain softens to mist, you whisper a small thank you. To the roads, to the hands that fed you, to the mornings that waited without judgment. You gather your things, but linger for one last sip, letting it cool against your lips until it's almost gone. You think tomorrow will taste different, but it will still be breakfast. And that's enough. Now the journey eases to stillness. The last caravan fades beyond the horizon. The last cup empties. The world stretches into a long exhale. You lie back, eyes heavy. The sounds of the markets, seas and mountains, dissolving into hush. Somewhere, far off, you can almost hear a pan sizzling, a kettle beginning to hum, echoes of life continuing without hurry. The air feels warm and soft, like the steam that once rose from the congee pot, like the milk churned on the step, like the first sunlight glancing off a pot of tea. Your breath slows. The stories begin to blur, their edges melting into one another, until all the centuries fold into a single comforting thought. People everywhere wake, eat, and hope. You picture the silk routes not as lines on a map, but as threads of light weaving through night and dawn, binding kitchens and hearths, tents and cities, hearts and hands. Each thread hums with the same quiet promise. The day will begin again, and we will share it. You turn the thought over one last time, like a smooth stone in your palm, and let it go. The hum of the fan or the rain or your own breathing becomes the lullaby. The road stretches farther, but you don't need to follow now. Someone else, somewhere, is stirring the morning pot. You are safe. You are full. You can rest. Sweet dreams, traveler.